All right, we're back here in the locker room on 97.3 ESPN and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. And I'm really excited to have my next guest joining me here on the Sports Hotline. Let's welcome into the locker room former head coach of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, Paul Johnson. What's up, Coach?
How you doing, man?
All right. I'll tell you what, Coach. I've been trying to get in touch with you for some time, and I know now you got a little time on your hands because you just retired from an illustrious football career that started way back 37 years ago when I was in college at Lees McRae Junior College in Banner Oak, North Carolina.
You're right. I think I just finished counting a couple years in high school. 40 years without a break. I went 40 straight years, so it was time to take a little break.
Coach, I got to tell you how cool it is to have you on my show. First of all, I've been following your career very closely because you were back in 1981-82. We were together at Lees McRae. You were the offensive coordinator, offensive line coach. I played quarterback. I was behind Earl Clinton, and I'll never forget that. And that was that your first year coach in college?
Yeah, I came. I'd coached at the high school where I'd played there in Avery County. When I graduated from college, I went back to my high school and coached for a couple of years, and then over to Lees McRae. So we had quite a host of characters on that team. That was an interesting deal.
It was a lot of fun. 37 years coaching, and 2 NCAA Division I AA championships at Georgia Southern. And then, of course, you went on to, I believe you went on to Hawaii after that, coached a little while, or you went to Georgia Southern as a defensive line coach, offensive line coach, or offensive coordinator. Then you went to Hawaii, spent time in Hawaii. That had to be a pretty unique situation, coaching football in Hawaii.
Yeah, it was different. I was fortunate. I've kind of gone in a circle. I went from Lees McRae to Georgia Southern, and then in '85 and '86 at Georgia Southern, I was the offensive coordinator, and we won back-to-back national championships. I left there and went to the University of Hawaii for 8 years, then to the Naval Academy for 2 as the offensive coordinator, and then back to Georgia Southern as the head coach. And we won a couple more national championships there when I was the head coach, and then back to Navy as the head coach, and then to Georgia Tech. So I kind of traveled around in a circle.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a really nice career you had in front of you. Did you ever think that you end up at Georgia Tech after being at Lees McRae?
No, it was crazy how I ended up at Lees McRae. I had, I grew up in North Carolina, and it's big basketball more than football. And when I came back from coaching in college, or when playing in college, when I came back to the Avery High School, my football coach who I played for was the head coach. And basically I wanted to be the head football coach at Avery High. That's what I wanted to do. And so I thought I'd coach for him for a couple of years and he'd retire. And 2 years in, they tried to make me the basketball coach, and I left and went to Lees McRae. And, I thought I'd put in a couple of years there and get my graduate degree and go back, and it just kind of worked out. I ended up at Georgia Southern and then Hawaii, and by the time I was 29, I was the offensive coordinator at the University of Hawaii, so it worked out great.
We're talking with the former head coach of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, the Ramblin' Wreck, Paul Johnson. And Coach, you got won the ACC conference in 2009. You've got some great accomplishments. 2-time Division I AA Coach of the Year, 3-time ACC Coach of the Year. But you were under a lot of scrutiny for your offense. You run that triple option, the flex bone. A lot of people criticize that, especially at Navy and Georgia Tech. Why do you think that is?
Well, people who didn't understand football, didn't understand the offense. But we were pretty successful. I think over probably a 35-year time frame at 4 different schools, we averaged about 35 points a game, 460 yards. So it was pretty successful for us. And as you said, we were fortunate. When I was the head coach at Georgia Southern, we went 62-10 the 5 years I was there, and won the Southern Conference every year. couple national championships, and we inherited a Navy team that had gone 3-30 the prior 3 years before we got there. And after our first year, we never won less than 8 games the next 5 years.
And I know
at Georgia Tech, we played in a couple Orange Bowls, 3 Coastal Division championships, 3 ACC championship games, and we had a lot of success. But I think it was hard for people because so many of them said it wouldn't work, and when they say that, they want to be right, so they just can't keep finding reasons why it won't work.
Now, down in your neck of the woods, down there in Atlanta area, I guess it's pretty tough recruiting athletes that want to come to Georgia Tech, running that type of offense, especially with Georgia and all the other teams in the SEC. That had to be tough recruiting wars.
Well, it's tough to recruit there, but I'm not sure it had anything to do with the offense. If you look historically at Georgia Tech and their recruiting, we were pretty much on par with. The coach that preceded me was a guy named Chan Gailey, who, of course, coached the Dallas Cowboys and for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and was head coach in the NFL. And he was there for 6 years, I think. And their recruiting classes weren't any ranked higher than ours. It's you're at a school that is a great academic school. You have limited majors, and your stadium seats 50,000, and you're recruiting against people in that area with Alabama and Georgia, and that they seat 90,000. It's just a different game.
We're talking with Coach Paul Johnson, former coach of Georgia Tech and Naval Academy. I know my family is really big into the Army-Navy games over the years. My brother-in-law and my nephew graduated from West Point class of 71 and 2000, so Army-Navy was really big for us. I know we go to every game, and I try to get your attention a couple times. We had good seats. We were down low. Obviously, you had a lot of people tugging at you, but always enjoyed that game. And talk to us a little bit about what it meant to coach at the Naval Academy. And you're talking about some traditions, a lot of pride within the academies. What was it like? What type of experience did you have there?
No, it was a great experience. I mean, you're dealing with outstanding young men, and people are going to be leaders in our country. And I feel very fortunate to have coached there, and I was pretty lucky as a head coach there for 6 years. We won 11-1 against Air Force and Army. We never lost to Army. In my very first year, we beat Air Force, and after that, we won the next 5 against them. But it was it's surreal. I think anybody who's never been to an Army-Navy game ought to put that on their bucket for the experience. And to have been in the locker room, I mean, you're down there with some very important people. I mean, the President of the United States is there in the locker room.
Oh, man.
Always have the Army Secretary of the Navy. And the atmosphere and everything that surrounds the game is second to none. At Georgia Tech, our big rival was Georgia, and that's kind of a different kind of rival because the two schools hate each other all the time. And the thing about an Army-Navy game, for 60 minutes, they're going to fight like crazy. But after the game's over, they realize they're on the same side, and the camaraderie and the respect for each other is unparalleled. And that was fun to be a part of that.
Coaching at Annapolis, I mean, the Commanders-in-Chief Trophy is probably one of the most prestigious trophies to win, especially within the academies. It's when all 3 play. And like I said, you won, 11 of those, I think, right? Or 10 of those?
Well, we won 5. We won 5 of the 6 years I was
5
there.
of the 6 years, okay. Yeah, that's and then Georgia Tech, I mean, you're right there in the city of Atlanta. A lot of, I guess, who gets most of the press, the Bulldogs or the Yellow Jackets down there?
Well, Atlanta's kind of a different city from a media standpoint in that, you got the Falcons, you got the Braves, you got the Hawks, you got the University of Georgia, and Atlanta's really a transient city. There's, 7 million people there, and a large part of those people, like if you drove through our neighborhood where we lived, you'd see Ohio State flags, Michigan flags. My next door neighbor was a big-time Alabama fan. Across the street was Auburn and Florida State. So there's a lot of transient people there, but the University of Georgia probably, gets most of the headlines. And the one thing that you want to do in Atlanta is try not to be the worst team. because the worst team's taking the beating. And you know me, I kind of got sideways with a couple of the radio personalities there on the daily talk shows, and they tried to beat us up every chance they got.
We're talking with Coach Paul Johnson, former coach of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, the Ramblin' Wreck. And Coach, there's some changes going on in the ACC now. I mean, FSU lost Jimbo Fisher. Louisville just hired the former Appalachian State head coach Scott Satterfield, and of course the Tar Heels brought back Mac Brown. And then of course Temple, Georgia Tech gets the former Temple head coach who's up here in Philadelphia, Jeff Collins.
Right, yeah, a lot of transition. I think in the ACC, you had Louisville and North Carolina, who both dismissed their coach, and I decided to retire. Really, I told our athletic director I was going to retire in probably November before the season was over, and we just kind of kept it under the wraps. But yeah, they hired Jeff Collins, who had been 2 years at Temple, and he had spent some time at Georgia Tech. I don't think he was ever in a full-time role at Georgia Tech. He had been a graduate assistant, and then he worked in the recruiting office, but at least he had been there in Atlanta and knew some people.
Coach Johnson, in the college atmosphere, how much influence do the boosters have? A lot of the alumni, especially down there in the ACC and the SEC. I mean, you hear about. I mean, there was a lot of speculation that you were forced out. I mean, I asked you that the other day on the phone, but I mean, how does that?
Yeah.
Is that how the rumors get started, through the alumni and stuff?
Well, I probably through message boards and talk radio, people who are ignorant who don't know what's going on. Trust me, if I'd have been forced out, I would have collected my $7 million at the end, and that I had still my contract. So, yeah, it was. It was a decision. I had been thinking about it for a couple of years, and it's very rare in this profession to go through a career without getting fired. And I was fortunate. I went 40 years without ever happening. And when you do that, also, you never get a break because it's 40 straight years. And, I was just kind of wore down, and I said, hey, look, I'm young enough. I'll take a break. I'll step back. If I miss it really badly, I'll go back. And if I don't, hey, it's been great. I got to do this for 40 years. So, no, I made that decision on my own. And, in fact, the administration at Georgia Tech begged me to try to at least stay one more year. And I didn't want to do that.
Which leads me into my next question. Did you ever have any offers for pro football or going anywhere? Not that Georgia Tech isn't a big school, but it may be like another program that's maybe a little bit, more visible.
Never to be a head coach in the NFL, but I had multiple offers from SEC schools, Big Ten schools. While I was at Georgia Tech, I had probably at least 7 or 8 other Power 5 job offers. And, it just didn't interest me. I kind of enjoyed Georgia Tech because of the academics. It was very similar to the academies from that standpoint. And I had a daughter in high school for the most part. After the very first year I was at Georgia Tech, I had offered the Auburn job. And my daughter was a 9th grader in high school, and I wasn't going to move her again. And so it just didn't work out. I mean, there were several things like that came along that, I never felt like that when I was coaching that it did you any good to publicize that. A lot of guys go out and leak stuff to the press, and a lot of it's not even true. In my mind, it would get so good to tell people that so-and-so offered you a job when you didn't take it, because then maybe if you wanted one sometime, the other would be afraid to offer it to you, afraid they'd get exposed. So I just, I was happy where I was, and I ended up finishing my career there. I was tempted a couple times to come back home to my state, North Carolina. I had several job offers at different times with schools there, and I just chose to stay where I was.
Clemson is a powerhouse this year, and odds-on favorite to maybe compete for the national championship. What do you think of this new quarterback, obviously freshman last year, Trevor Lawrence?
Well, after our game last year, when he started, they pulled the guy in our game, and he came in and rallied them. And he's tremendous. I mean, he's got a strong arm. He's more athletic than people think, and he's a definite, probably future number 1 draft pick.
And you've coached against some great coaching talent, Dabo Sweeney, Nick Saban from Alabama. I mean, those guys. What makes those guys special in your mind?
Good players.
Just good players. That's it.
Well, no, I mean, they're good coaches, but you know, if you go back and you look and you think about it, I mean, you know, Nick probably wasn't as good a coach at Toledo and Michigan State as he was at Alabama and LSU.
So he learned along the way, I guess. Picked up things.
Well, you get better players, and you know, Dabo's done a great job at Clemson, and he's a good coach. But you know, I can remember early on in the league, you know, we beat Dabo the first 3 or 4 times we played him at Georgia Tech. And he was a little bit on the hot seat after his 3rd year, and they started pouring a ton of money into the program, and they brought in some different coordinators. And Dabo's always done a great job recruiting. And, you know, they took off, and I give him credit. I mean, he's done a tremendous job, and he's built that program into a powerhouse. But, you know, if you take a look and you go back for 30 years, and that's what sometimes people don't understand, there hasn't been a national championship team in probably 30 years that doesn't have a 80,000-seat stadium and a budget. It just kind of works that way. It's like anything. The more finances and the more support you have, sometimes the better, you know, the better you play. So there's a lot of great coaches at different schools. I mean, you know, if you swapped whoever, if you swapped Dave Clawson from Wake Forest and put him at Clemson and Dabo at Wake Forest, you might have the same thing. It's, you know, they're both good coaches, but one has a lot more tools to work with than the other.
Well, I'll tell you what, Coach, I really appreciate you. I mean, this is so surreal for me, because to have you, you know, as a coach way back when, and to see your progression through the college ranks, and to becoming the head coach that your accomplishments is really, really gratifying for me. I thank you so much for taking time to call in, and enjoy your retirement. I know you're playing a lot of golf, so good luck with that.
Well, it's great to talk to you, and tell your brother who's flying a cargo plane, I'm glad he's flying cargo instead of and you guys, it was fun to coach you guys way back when in junior college.
All right, thanks a lot, Coach Paul Johnson. We really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your retirement.
All right, take care.
All right, there's Coach Paul Johnson on the Sports Hotline. Georgia Tech, Navy, had a great career coaching in the college ranks, and not only that, he was a leader of men. And that's one thing about Coach. One thing I remember about Coach Johnson, he cared about his players, and he cared about his team.